You, President. Will I rise to make a statement on the report of the Electoral Matters Committee into the conduct of the 2022 Victorian state election tabled on the 30th of July. The committee's report found that, and I quote, "trust is a critical part of a healthy democracy." But, President, misinformation and disinformation continues to proliferate our political system with false information and polarising campaigns serving to undermine our democratic principles and rupture social cohesion in our communities. We've got young people digesting a digital news cycle that must be constantly viewed critically to distinguish fact from fiction. As a result, many young Australians are finding themselves overwhelmed and disillusioned, leading them to avoid news altogether. The University of Canberra found that 69% of those who distrust news are more likely to disengage altogether. A functioning democracy is dependent upon two things: participation and legitimacy. Both are thrown into uncertainty when disinformation and misinformation is consistently perpetuated by community leaders. The Electoral Matters Committee's report found this to be true in Victoria too. The findings state that mis and disinformation campaigns that arose in the 2022 state election were from broader societal trends that cannot be directly reversed. We've seen the consequences of misinformation from our friends in the US, where ordinary citizens resort to violence to pursuit of lies and deceit originating from their leaders. The storming of the Capitol on January 6 was a public demonstration of the lies told by far-right leaders. And since 2016, the majority of Americans, about 64%, found defining basic facts difficult as a result of having to constantly wade through fabricated news and information. It's no coincidence that 64% of people in the US also believe that democracy is in crisis and at risk of falling, and such sentiment comes from a political and information ecosystem which distrusts facts, instills falsehoods and leverages division. And yet, when leaders of our community, in our state, continue to pepper our communities with misinformation on matters of interest to them, it does nothing more than to instill fear and distrust in our democracy. We've already witnessed that today, President. Fortunately, since last night, I've been able to update my speech to include these changes, but during Dr Ratnam's inaccuracy-laden speech earlier this morning, she managed to mislead the House on the future of the Births, Deaths and Marriages Registry, which the day prior was confirmed by the Leader of the Government as not being privatised. That didn't stop Dr Ratnam making those claims that it was in her contribution today. And it's not the first time that they've done it, and it's not the only time that they've done it. Through the continual perpetuation of inaccurate information, such as their claims that Labor was arming Israel, we don't, they are seeking to divide our communities for electoral gain. This misinformation is prevalent in other petitions that they've brought forward, one of which speaks to the, and I quote, wholesale destruction and privatisation of Victoria's 44 remaining public housing towers, which is plainly inaccurate, because we know that there is public housing being rebuilt at some of these sites. The first two towers to be announced for redevelopment will have public housing built on that land. Press releases that they release, again, recently said that Labor has an agenda to sell off public land to developers. Again, factually inaccurate. Let's take a look at what's happening at Barrack Beacon, where 46% of increase in social housing is being built on land that remains in public ownership. This misinformation is the Greens Party's version of politics done differently. And it is different, because while Labor's getting on with the job of improving public services, building social homes in this state, the Greens are stoking fear and division. And as against our plans, are trying to stop our plans to build more social housing. And I think what's worse is that we've got responsible elected officials who are seeking to exploit divisions for political gain. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who tells the lie. The only difference lies with is where they identify on the ideological spectrum. We, as elected officials, have a duty to strengthen our democratic system by ensuring facts are clearly distinguished from fiction. We must recognise the power our officers hold. For the future of the state and our democracy, we must do better.